MaGustavo, welcome to Dynamic Conversations. This moment has been a long time coming, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me introduce us really quickly to the audience that is going to be watching this, my people and your people, and the people we have in common. So you and I met in a group through one of our favorite people, Amanda Flaker, um, who's doing a lot of work on sort of a new way of living, which is heaven on earth living, and that you and I are going to really get into today, and abundance living. And we connected through that group, and we've become close friends through that group, mainly because we have such a high frequency about talking about the things that we love to talk about. And I want to add, MaGustavo, that we love talking about this on a daily basis. That's super important to me. And you, MaGustavo, are one of the first people in my life that I've experienced as someone who has such commitment and such conviction to these life principles. The life principle of living your daily life like heaven on earth, and abundant thinking, and using your tools, that I just felt so called to ask you to join me in dynamic conversation, for sure. I want to just welcome you and start this conversation a little bit. Gustavo, can we start off by talking about when you and I first met? You talked to me about your spiritual awakening. But can we start earlier than that? Can you say more about like your childhood, who you've been, and when you saw those little moments of coming awake, because they were happening all along. Um, Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me today.
yeah,
Definitely is like from the first time you mentioned having me on to now, it's been a little bit of time, but
yes.
divine timing
I think we
for
talked about it
sure.
in March or something, right? March of, yeah, of this year.
Yeah, everything's flowing along and working perfectly in divine timing. So,
Yes.
um, yeah. Um, so, I
Mm.
guess to answer the question more so, growing up and I guess being aware of some sort of spiritual aspect of myself. Um, I mean, the way that I share this has everything to do with my experience going to church and growing up as a, I mean, the way that my parents um, would look at it would be as we were Christians, Baptist Christians. I just went to church because I like learning about Jesus and because they forced me to, pretty much
Uh-huh.
ish. But what I would notice, I think the main thing that I would notice is how a lot of people, I don't want to generalize, but like, a lot of people, or at least my impression of what was going on was there was a lot of like praising the name of the Lord, you know, treat everybody like you'd like to be treated, and,
Mhm.
doing this to become better people. But then when we leave church, leave Sunday, especially in my household, it wasn't practiced that much. Going to school, just in society in general, wasn't practiced that much. Like everybody wasn't treating everybody as they like to be treated, at least from my perspective.
And you noticed that early on as a young boy.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed something was off. I
Mhm.
noticed
Mhm.
that things could be different. Things could be better.
Mhm.
Maybe hypocrisy is a too big of a word, but I felt like a lot of people were just highly hypocritical because
Mhm.
we're human, and we fall into those things, and those things that we don't really want to be like too much too often. But I feel like the exuberance or the high amount of praising the name of the Lord and talking about these principles and such on Sunday just fell off the tracks the rest of the week,
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
thing. So there was this big like separation for me. And I was always quiet and more reserved in my own beingness, just
Mhm.
do my own thing. So that's definitely something that I tuned into a lot growing up.
You said that like naturally you liked learning about Jesus.
Mm.
What did that mean to you? Like what did you notice about Jesus?
Treat others as you'd like to be treated. I think
Mm.
fundamentally that's like the core. That's the core. But
Mhm.
I think just as a byproduct of the church that I was going to, and maybe the Sunday school programs that I was going to, I think there was just a lot of teaching about Jesus as opposed
Mhm.
to many other things from the Bible.
Mhm.
Um, but I think from an early age, from an early age, there's always been that divine timing kind of sense in my life, where like I'm being, I'm experiencing this moment in reality right now purposefully. It's not an accident. I didn't just, end up going to church as a Baptist Christian for no reason. There's something to it. So I think there's a lot of that when it comes to like my excitement with Jesus and his stories and such.
Mhm. I know I've heard you say Jesus, my man. I've heard you say that just in our conversations, and I've always really appreciated it because of course he's a very high teacher, right? And he's just important in the spiritual discovery. So it's interesting. You'll see me taking notes, my Gustavo. So be patient with me because I'm gonna, as you talk, I'll have more questions, and so I take notes. But I did write down divine timing, and I was gonna save that for later because you speak to that a lot. But why don't we just insert it now? Like say more about divine timing, how you
Yeah,
hold that concept.
well, we'll be here forever, maybe. No, I'm kidding. But it's just being in the flow. Be trying. It's understanding. I think fundamentally, it's understanding that we exist right now in our present moment on a planet, in a civilization, a part of a species, a human species that is largely, seemingly unaware that what we are is divine. That what we are is that the entirety of our reality is interconnected, and that this sensation of separation, or that, in a sense, not everything that happens around me is saying something about me, in a sense. That there's this there's this need to survive. There's this need to fight against things, and that things are happening against me as opposed to for me. So from that basis, it seems like everything is out of timing. Everything is out of sync. Everything is like I gotta try really hard to have things work for me and to have things go my way. And
Let me pause you there. Like, so you're saying that that's how we normally live. This isn't sort of the idea of divine timing. It's the opposite of divine timing,
right,
correct?
right,
Right. Uh-huh.
yeah. Well, so divine timing is understanding that what we truly are and who we truly are is in that flow all the time. So
Mhm.
so it's having that commitment, having that dedication and that drive and that desire to access that point. And then by accessing that point, we can clear a lot of the erroneous beliefs, which fundamentally become patterns and habits and behaviors and ways of being that we have that keep us out of that flow. So the more we do that, the more we enter that flow. The more we enter that flow, the more things are synchronistic, divine timing, like, oh, okay, so there's actually a purpose for me out here. Things
Right.
are working in things are working in order. It's a symphony out here. There's a lot of cooperative components that come together to just provide you with an experience of like a seamless, like uninterrupted flow.
So, You always make my mind pop so much. So I'm gonna sometimes translate, okay? Translate what you're saying because I can see you elevate. So and I can feel you elevate and I love it. So some of what you're saying, and we're gonna really get into this in a bit because I want to get back to your childhood, but is is that there is purpose to everything that is happening to us, especially when we are aware and we can drop into the now moment. We can see the cooperative components of that time, right? Of that moment. Otherwise, we keep living, which most of us do until we get more spiritually in sync. We live as though things are happening to us and we're victims to it. We're attacked by timing, we're attacked by the world almost, as opposed to us realizing that the now moment is for us if we can drop into it. Something like that. Yes?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
for sure, for sure. There's a lot of things that are, there's a lot of patterns and habits and behaviors and beliefs and those such things that we pick up on, but also through like lineage and ancestry and all these things. So we kind of come in already predisposed to certain behaviors and certain habits, certain beliefs in a sense, and clearing those. Yeah, clearing
Yes.
those, getting through
Yes.
those, being able to live with those in a sense, accept those. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, but yeah, fundamentally,
Well, we'll get
uh,
to that. That's why I make dynamic conversation sort of a longer interview because I do like to get into the nitty gritty. And basically, those beliefs are that life is hard. Like they tend to be like life takes a lot of effort and is hard, and there's just mountains to move all the time. Um, and we'll get to this idea that maybe with divine timing and with flow, um, we can find the abundance of ease. So Jesus, let's get back to Jesus. And so what you were saying that part of your divine timing was having to have your first years of experience be about noticing this incongruence, this spiritual incongruence between the energy you were experiencing at work and then what was happening, let's say, the 6 other days of the week. I mean, not at work, at Sunday school, right? Correct?
yeah.
Yeah. So what else started to happen, MaGustavo? I know that you had other moments where you were waking up a little bit. Um, like your
In
teen.
childhood,
Yeah, yeah. And in teenage where you were noticing things or maybe feeling the offness of things.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm very reserved. So what I try, one thing I try to do is stay within my own beingness, as opposed to looking out at the world too much and trying to find problems, trying to find enemies out there. I just try to
Mhm.
focus on my internal state of being and make sure that I'm good. Because I've innately known my entire life that my power is within me, and I don't need to try to control anything outside of me necessarily.
Mm.
But I would say that a larger awakening moment would probably be when I was around like grade 8 in elementary school, and I heard a band called System of a Down for the first time, and it's a heavy metal band, and I think the primary energy that they came with was a lot of rebellion, um, controlled rebellion, but a lot of rebellion in the sense of like um, they're an Armenian band, and I think some if not a lot of their music is driven by like the genocide that happened in Armenia
Mhm,
and the incongruencies in our society and in the structures of society. And like one of the lyrics that are very intense or very big in my mind from them is it's it's like why do presidents send the poor to war, and why don't they just go, kind of thing. So I guess that kind of awoke me to this whole dynamic of like, okay, well, hold up, I'm here to make big changes on the planet, and there are things that are out of balance.
Mhm.
So I'm here to like shine the light very strongly. But I also feel like just heavy metal in general, I'm a big fan, has allowed
Mhm.
me to um, work through and keep a lot of lower emotions at bay, like perhaps anger being one of them. Allow me to channel
Hmm.
it.
Great. Say more about that. That's interesting because I think certainly the part of the work that I do in dynamic or even as a psychotherapist, and especially like with men, right? Men, anger being one of the I always want to say like, men are allowed like four feelings, anger being one of them, lust being another one, like the range of feelings for men is so limited the way the culture has taught them. Um, they have anxiety being another one. But say more about sort of what did it mean to you in terms of using heavy metal for anger? Say more about that.
Well, it just allowed me to go into that place without having to unleash it on the world.
Mhm.
So I can put the music on full blast, whatever. I can just tune into that and just accept it as a part of my human nature and as something that's very, very prevalent on Earth at this time. A lot of angry people, but a lot of angry people
Always.
who but a lot of angry people who don't know how to channel it, who don't know how to use it to their benefit. So they just unleash it on the next person who comes along or whatever the case may be. So I feel like definitely metal allowed me to do that, contain a lot of just be able to live with myself because my home situation, although wasn't the worst by any means, right? Like I'm sure you know, there's a lot of examples of much, much worse treatment, but my home situation was a more heavier one. A lot of the way I like to explain it, a lot more lack um,
Mhm.
going on. But where is there no lack on this planet? So like I remain extremely grateful for my experience growing up. But I guess specifically, just an environment in which there were a lot of priorities that I felt weren't necessarily the highest ones that should have been attended to. And because of that, things were kind of out of whack. And so I felt like a lot of my childhood and growing up, I had to really just sink into my own beingness, um, and do my own thing a lot of the time, and try to just like kind of live until I could make my own way without having such strong maybe Christian ideals enforced upon me, very strong ones.
That felt incongruent. So it's so interesting. I love this because these are little moments, right? These are really powerful moments. So because I know this part of your story, I can already track that moment, let's say with heavy metal, or what heavy metal was for you was a tool. And you and I are going to talk a lot about tools because spirituality requires tools, and self exploration and self knowledge requires tools. But also, it sounds like the one of the themes that kept being consistent again was incongruence. Like, why do presidents send the why do presidents send others to war? Right? Like, hold up, that's incongruent. Like these feelings of something's off. Um, but also, being able to the practice, because that's another thing you and I are going to talk about, because I think you are someone who really practices. And so heavy metal became this tool, this practice, again, this undergirding of something is off here. And you knew it, and you knew it. And the practice of beingness, right? Like, instead of doing this, you were doing this a lot, a lot. Uh-huh. Okay, so heavy metal, eighth grade, keep going. Well, one thing I'd love to mention, if it's okay with you, is that you are from, this is important to me. It might not be important to you, but you know that I'm Colombian and you're Uruguayan. And I like to bond around, being Latinos and just in general, just as a personality trait. Um, but because I find it curious, I find it really curious. I just find those little pieces very curious about your background as well. Um, and for the audience, we do speak in Spanish sometimes, and it's really fun. But for now, we'll speak in English. But keep going, Magu. So I know that high school, and you grew up in Canada, right? Right?
Yeah.
That's where you are right
Toronto.
now. Yeah, in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I want you to feel free about talking about all of your experiences here. So let's say in high school, what was happening in
Well, in high
terms of,
school, that smothering kind of energy at home
mm-hmm,
that didn't allow me to fully express who I am, or what I have to share with the world. But I guess it all divine timing, right? All perfect the way it worked out. But at that time, I definitely went into myself
mm-hmm,
completely,
okay,
like completely. So I guess just to further along metal,
mm,
um, one of the huge things that I just became aware of more so recently that metal helped me do was really, really tune into the energy of death, like quite literally death. So on a more spiritual level, understanding that like we are not the body, right? We are not the ego, and that what we are is beyond the temporal, changing, natural world. Um, One of my favorite bands, and for the past decade, if not a little bit longer than that, that's what they dive into. That's the energy that the band shares. So going through, well, listening to their music and listening to metal really allowed me to go through a lot of ego death that I wasn't aware of at the time. Naturally,
mm-hmm,
I'm like 15, 16, 17, wasn't aware of that was happening. But as I tune back into it now, it's like, oh wow, this band is always singing about like the ephemeralness of reality, or like death and sorrow, and the way that the seasons are always changing, and it's the death and rebirth always.
mm-hmm.
So that was a big thing. But like more specifically, I felt like I was just dying. My ego was dying consistently in high school because I just wanted to spend time alone. I would either be listening to music on my own or playing video games on my own, just doing my own thing, um, trying to survive. But then I
Right,
guess
right.
in the middle of high school, at 16 years old, my parents got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like this divine timing again, perfect, because that separation between the two of them created more of an ability for me to then be able to reach out and express myself.
Yeah.
But I skipped a lot of high school. And
My Gustavo, say more about ego deaths. I use ego deaths a lot too, in terms of sort of like the ability to recreate ourselves constantly, recreate our parenting, our love lives, our sex life, just our identities, like that we can die, and we can choose that's a choice, right? But that it does require a death of a grieving, a sorrow sometimes of something that was. But say more about what you understand about ego death. How do you define it, or experience it?
it's not remaining attached to anything we think we should be. And if we
Mm,
sense something coming on, to go with it, and to change and to shift, and to work through, transmute, block out any of those voices of any past memories, which are typically like people or society or culture telling us how we should be. So really blocking all that out and just going forward regardless. Committed with that voice or that urge within us that says, okay, well, if you go that way, you're gonna be delivered. Or you're gonna find gold. Your experience is going to be more fluid. Your experience is going to be more whole, easy. You can have a much more peaceful time. But if you keep holding on to these voices telling you who you should be and what you should be, you're going to degrade. You're going to keep falling into a hole, kind of thing.
For sure. For sure. For sure. For sure. And
So sorry. So let
go
me
ahead. Go ahead. Keep
specific
going. Keep
example.
going. Keep going.
Specific
Yeah.
example. Growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of people who were seemingly of a completely different vibration and energy. So just music wise, a lot of the people that I grew up with were into completely different type of music than I was. So I could have tried to fit in and listen to the music that they liked, but I decided to start listening to the music that inspired me. And that meant that I couldn't fit in with them. So that meant that throughout elementary and high school, all of the people that I knew, and I know that this might seem a little dramatic, but music is like my entire life kind of thing. But I think music and the vibration of music also sorts out into the rest of the energy of how our lives manifest. But it choosing to move in that direction meant I was moving away from people who were existing in maybe a different, I don't want to say a lower, but a different energy that wasn't going to complement my growth, that wasn't going to complement my greatest version, my highest self. So more practically, it took moving away from a lot of people I grew up with and spent a lot of time with.
So it's okay. So it's really important because I know when people are listening to us, like so much, I mean, this is in general, but especially of your constant experience is staying on the pulse of energy. And for those of you who are listening to us, where we're headed in this conversation is MaGustavo's sort of genius at identifying energy. And so I'd like to say that that moment, and music is all energy. Music is all energy, however it is, and for whoever it fits, at whatever level we are, certain music. I always say I don't listen to the breakup songs anymore because I don't, I'm just not in that energy anymore. But there was a time I would play the breakup songs over and over and over, right? Because that soothed me for that type of, not anymore. So what you're describing there in that moment is realizing what I call the click moments, the identity click moments. There was something about that type of music that just bathed you with your identity. Like it just clicked. And maybe music for others was their identity, right? But it also meant that in you taking ownership of that, or not even ownership, but just being that is meant that there was an ego death about separating from others. That you were choosing them, like, and choice is important for what we want to talk about, but that you were choosing yourself in that moment. You were choosing the energy of yourself in that moment.
Yeah,
correct?
for sure.
Yeah, that's why it is like a little awakening. At the time you might not have known that, but you sort of like you were aware of energy at that point when with this whole music idea.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so massive ego death. Awareness though, awareness of what you were choosing, right?
Yeah.
That's important too. And then keep going. I know your story, but
as far as what more specifically?
Well, we could talk about psychedelics. I'm totally open to
The
talk.
natural, yeah, the natural,
Sure, sure, sure.
the moments in time. Well, sure, for sure. So probably around, I think it was 18 or 19,
Mhm.
17 to 19 range. Um, I did have my first psychedelic experience. And I know I was sharing this with you the other day, but I feel
Mhm.
like psychedelics are best experienced when they're offered, when they come to us, and all we need to do is say yes, as opposed to us like going for them
Mhm.
and trying. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way either, but so when I was around that age, a buddy of mine had he just presented it to me. He asked me if I wanted to try a psychedelic, a plant medicine called Salvia divinorum. And honestly, again, divine timing. Just it excited me. I was like, oh, what is this? I want to try this out. So we ended up uh, trying it out in my bedroom. This is inexperience, right? No research, no nothing. Just like, living life by the whatever the best saying for that is. But that was a huge, I guess you could say that was a huge ego death, but that was a major ego death because my experience of it simply was me com- flying out of my body to the corner of my room, looking at my body on the couch,
Mm.
and then like a storybook playing out of me crossing a bridge, and then
Mm.
and then when the book was closing, and as it was closing,
Mm.
I felt this very, 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 very deep fear of like, oh, it's over, that's
Mhm.
it. But then it closed, and then I was back in the body.
Mhm.
So that was very, very intense. I think 5 or 10 minutes after, I still felt like I was in between worlds. Um, but then other tools helped me bring myself back to the earth plane completely,
Mhm.
100%. And I was back, and I didn't know what happened, but it was amazing.
Well, I need to make a disclaimer since I'm a psychotherapist, but you and I talk about psychedelics a lot, and that's certainly so. Right now, the field is just burgeoning. The field of psychology and psychiatry is burgeoning. Like it is, even the FDA, they're in their third round. By 2022, psychedelics will be a treatment modality, a legitimate treatment modality for post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, manic depression, um, and addictions, straight up, right? So there's been years of trials now. Um, and so I am myself training to be a psychotherapist who can do what they call psychedelic integration for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is one of my areas of expertise. So the reason why I want to open up the conversation of psychedelics is because of the power and impact they have in allowing for a rebirth, allowing for a rebirth. And you talk a lot about the impact that different psychedelic experience had on your life that were very specific to your spiritual journey. In fact, you see it as all spiritual, right? Um, and in this case, you had um, a real life experience of being out of your body, out of your body. Um, and possibly one of the powers is being separated from your personality, from what we should be, from what we should be, like the ability to be here. is quite powerful.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very powerful for sure. I think growing up I was very much like that already, but that gave me the proof in a sense, which
Mhm.
I which in a sense, because I'm not too sure on that sense, but let's just say I have that kind of experience, and now there's this way of perceiving reality which is foolproof. Like there's no doubt. So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm not any of that. So now that I know I'm not any of that, I can let go. I can let go of anything that I think I am. So if something I think I am is causing me a lot of trouble in my life, why am I holding on to it?
Give me an example of that, like, because these are the concrete examples of being attached to who we think we are that might be causing suffering. Give me an
Right.
example of that. For example.
So I guess just diving straight into it deep, uh, the son of my parents and what they want me to do as opposed to what I want to do.
Yes.
So my father wanted me to become a police officer. So I entertained it and I went to police foundations, which is a prerequisite kind of course you can do in Toronto and in Ontario. Um, but then just knowing that that's not who I am, knowing that that's not what I want for myself, knowing that that's not the direction I wanted to head in, it made it easier for me to let go of what he wanted for me and to go on my own path.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
that was in my early 20s.
mhm. Right. Sort of this constant, like, seeking of the self, knowing of the self, experiencing the self, right? Um,
Hmm.
you did have, when we had our first uh, you interviewed me. That's how we met. You interviewed me, but we talked about your spiritual awakening. And so we're getting close to that, aren't we? Like what happened there?
Sure.
What happened there?
Yeah. Well, even during that police foundations experience,
Mm-hmm.
there was a weekend in which I went to one of the friends there at the police foundations course, one of the friends there to one of their cottages. And during that cottage experience, I had what you could consider like a heroic dose of psilocybin, of magic
Mm-hmm.
mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that one was very, very interesting as well. It was more so uh, mm, seeing things, just experiencing a lot of the subconscious mind,
Ah.
but an exciting feeling. It was an exciting feeling. There was no fear. It was just things were appearing, and I just had a really, really amazing experience. Again, just another psychedelic experience of mine,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, which definitely slowed things down in my own experience big time, because there's a big difference between just the 5 minute experience of the salvia divinorum and the uh, hours long experience of the magic mushrooms. Just the being in that state for such a long period of time, it really highlighted a lot of things for me. And I was probably around 23. I went many years without experiencing psychedelics again. And again, that one was just brought out for me. And all I had to say was, yes, that's going to be a very exciting time. Um, Saw some really cool things on that experience that weren't there, but were definitely there for me. But yeah, shortly after that, I'd left the Police Foundations program. I knew it wasn't for me. And I went through a period where, I got this new job at this place called AIC, and it was a debt collecting agency, and it was cubicles, and it was calling Americans who bought Escalades on McDonald's salary. That was the joke.
Uh-huh.
That's the joke I like to make,
Uh-huh.
where it was just this insane environment, and I'm here trying to collect debts from I'm here trying to collect debts, and I'm like, this is not for me at all. Like, this is not me. This is not me. I can't sit in a cubicle all day calling people. So after the first day on the floor, I knew it wasn't for me. Like I knew it wasn't for me. There was no amount of money you could pay me. There was no way I was going to continue forward for this. So I made the choice to leave. And this was very, very impactful emotionally for me. And just because, I mean, I couldn't control the emotion that wanted to come out of me during this experience. And this is like a segue between where I was as an individual to where I was going for that spiritual awakening later on. But I couldn't control myself. So I ended up just going to the bathroom and crying, like letting it all out.
Yeah.
Um,
But can I pause you right there for a second,
sure.
Marcus? Really, it's important because I keep hearing these intense moments that are getting more intense of where you're like almost slapped in the face with incongruence, sort of like people on maybe minimum wage salaries trying to live in the world of looking like they're more than what they are, and then falling into debt, and then you chasing them for that. I mean, there's so much low frequency energy in that whole process, and that incongruence with the self for anyone in that, like whoever you look at, the debt collector, the person in debt, the what they're trying to be, all of it is so filled with shadows and incongruences that knowing who you are and how tapped in you are to energy, I can really see how that was just absolutely overwhelming. And our mentor, Amanda Flaker, talks about that, talks about going to jobs and coming home and just crying and crying and crying and crying because she didn't know it at the time, like how much she was absorbing these very, very intense, incongruent, dysfunctional energies. And this sounds like when you said I couldn't control it, I went to the bathroom and cried. It's almost like you were hit so hard with the experience of what I would call
Mm-hmm.
the non-self for
Yeah.
everyone involved, right?
Yeah.
So
So
it's important to note that, like, especially knowing you.
for sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, so then I went home and experienced like anxiety attacks for a week, and I just was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life because I would say to myself, if I can't collect debts, what am I going to do in this life? Like that's so easy, right? Um, Not the truth, but
Mm.
during that period, I had to ask myself a question, and that was, well, because I decided I wanted to go back to school um, and learn something. But I had to ask myself, what is it that I most enjoyed growing up? What is it that I most enjoyed taking in high school? What were the classes? What were the things that I most enjoyed doing? And I attribute, and this is like my highest excitement. I was asked, without knowing what I was doing, I was asking myself, what's my highest excitement? Kind of similar to the metal, right? Kind of similar to, well, what's my highest excitement? So these people's highest excitement is this particular type of music. This is my highest excitement. And I went with the metal. So in this case, I thought to myself, well, there was only really one course that I liked in high school, and that was American history. So history. And then I was searching college programs, and again, divine timing. A college program offering a diploma that would then allow you to get into university for a university degree. And the program was pretty much humanities, human arts. So a collection of psychology, humanities, history, world literature, sociology, and these such courses. And it would train you to become a university student because my grades weren't that great in high school. So following my urge, I entered this program, um, completely did amazing in those 2 years at the college, met amazing people, had an amazing time. Um, Transferred over to university, completed a year, completely same idea, just amazing experience, loved what I was doing, definitely my urge, definitely my passion. Um, and then in the middle of the summer, I had this idea that I wanted to get a PhD, that I wanted to become a professor and teach, because I mean, this is the only thing I saw myself doing, kind of thing. But profound awakening, which actually started in January of that year, not in the summer, in January of that year, where I had a profound psychological awakening as opposed to spiritual awakening. I say that my vibrational frequency overall spiked, went up a few notches. And then in the summer, it spiked even higher, but to a more spiritually aware place, where then I became aware of a lot of the things that I'm sharing with you today, of my past, of the things that I went through, the divine timing of my past, and all of the things that happened. Oh, they all interconnected. They all happened on purpose that led me up to this point. And I just kept following the breadcrumbs that were placed upon my path in the past. And it all culminated that summer with a profound awakening, where I just couldn't stop talking about what I had experienced to everybody. And I think I alienated everybody in my experience. They're like, what happened to Gus?
Because you were so just coming online, as they would say, just spiritually. That was 2015, right, Magus?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2015 for sure.
Yeah. Just excitement. Excitement beyond, just clarity. Yeah.
So one of the things you talk about a lot, I have like is this idea of highest excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Say more, because I mean, it's one of the things that you and I have in common the most is living not just life, but daily life. Daily life, reaching for our highest excitement, reaching for the better feeling constantly, right? So tell me what that means to you, is like this highest excitement concept.
I think at least early in the highest excitement concept, there is this big factor of the people and the structures and the systems and the things that you've manifested up to a certain point around you will not want you to do what you want to do. There will be like a barrier. So you'll be made fun of, people will ridicule you, and it'll seem like the worst decision you could ever make in your life, because everything in your experience will be telling you that it's not your highest excitement, that you shouldn't be doing that. But then there's that little voice inside you that says, but I like it. And you got to push towards that one, as opposed to the one with all the people around you. So it could be really scary to follow your highest excitement, because it's like, well, am I going to lose everything and lose everyone? And what's waiting for me? So maybe fear of the unknown and such.
Sure.
But I think that that's a big part of highest excitement following in the beginning. But then highest excitement becomes this thing that you just naturally flow towards as you get better and better. And I mean, there's like, insane ramifications for following that voice, for following that urge, as, Amanda Flaker talks a lot about. But yeah, Abraham Hicks talks a lot about it as well.
Sure.
It's really tuning into your higher self. It's really tuning into the frequency of abundance, tuning into just the energy of innovation and invention and creation of something that isn't being regurgitated.
It's expansion. I mean, so what I really love about what you just said, because one of the things that I do in dynamic is I break lofty ideas down. Okay, so I take these huge ideas, something like follow your highest excitement, which most people are like, you can't follow your highest excitement all the time, right? Like most people say that. And they say that because of what you just broke down. And what you just broke down is, it is scary. When you're first starting that path, you might look very different from everyone around you. You literally are moving away from the herd. But you're very aware that something's lighting up inside of you, right? This idea of following your highest excitement. So I really appreciate you saying that the beginning of the journey, that is scary. And it's a move into expansion, I think, or evolution, right? Every time we're moving into expansive evolution and creation, yeah, it can actually be pretty terrifying because you're not quite sure what systems will fall. Familiar ones that have soothed you and kept you comfortable,
Ego
right?
death.
It's a massive ego again, right? A massive ego death for sure. But with this pulsating aliveness towards what feels more like you, right?
Yes.
The you-ness of you, which you teach a lot. You sort of
Mhm.
are a PhD. You sort of are already in how you teach. Mhm. So,
Yeah. Just another thing about highest excitement. It's very important to keep in mind the long game. It's a long game thing. It's not an instant gratification thing. Your highest excitement is much, much less to do with instant gratification than it does with long-term gratification, because you can't follow your highest excitement at all times. If you've created systems and structures around you in which you have to go to your 9 to 5, you can't just go walk in nature and enjoy the sound of the birds and play board games with your best friend because you have to go to the 9 to 5. But you understand that you're going to give yourself the next 5 years to gradually move out of the 9 to 5 by seeking your highest excitement at every possible opportunity that you do have. And you'll get a little bit better at finding it in your 9 to 5 as you go along. But really, you're going to take advantage of your weeknights and your weekends. If you have the instant gratification, oh my goodness, I hate my 9 to 5, then you're going to waste your weeknights. You're just going to try to, so I think
well,
that,
can I banter with you a little bit here? Because one of the phrases that you use a lot, which I really love, because and you use it as a tool, the fine tuning, like you're fine tuning. So what I propose in those situations, let's say that you are at a 9 to 5 that you, and this is where you and I get into concrete, like, because how do we use these lofty ideals and actually implement them in our lives, right? Because that people don't just want to know, they want to know how, as Joe Dispenza says, right? We need to know how to follow our highest excitement. So you're saying, listen, you might not get out of your 9 to 5, right? I would propose, and I'd like to check that out with you, and I think Abraham Hicks is someone that in your 9 to 5, how are you fine tuning, finding your highest excitement in the ordinary, what I call how to make extraordinary the ordinary? How do you keep doing laundry, washing the dishes, watering the plants, soccer games? How do you find highest excitement there in the 9 to 5? Like that's sort of what I feel like. That's what I teach, is like in our moment by moment, in the ordinary, in riding the bus. How can we start thinking in highest excitement ways? I think this is something you do a lot, Marus, that you Magustavo, like that sort of, how do we keep asking ourselves, what could be my highest moment, my highest now moment, right? Um, Now, because there is only the now at my 9 to 5.
always seek the path of least resistance.
Say more.
Well, it's a very, very more broad question, because it's like it depends what level of your journey you're on as well.
Mhm.
Because I mean, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to uphold particular things. So sometimes we're in a 9 to 5 because it pays a lot, but we don't like it at all. So telling someone or asking someone to find a highest excitement in a place that they're at, which 99% of the time they hate, but it pays well, you tell them, well, find another job that you actually enjoy, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because there's there's different ways of going about things. There's different ways of going about creating an experience of heaven on earth.
Well, let's jump into that.
Because the 9 to 5 can be a heaven on earth experience, for sure. It can be, but I feel like that's the road less traveled, because in a 9 to 5 there isn't much control over your experience. You don't have control over your time. You don't have control over what you're doing. But it can be held. You can have a heaven on earth type experience at a 9 to 5. But I think fundamentally what that comes down to, I mean, depending on the 9 to 5, right? Are you working with a lot of people or are you working alone? But then it comes to the tools. What are the tools that you have in your tool bag to keep yourself present? So it depends what stage you are on in your journey. Because fundamentally, at the core, it's, do you have control over your thoughts, or are your thoughts running all over you? So it's really becoming aware of which thoughts are the ones that are creating the most discomfort and trigger for you, and dealing with those thoughts, accepting those thoughts. Well, what can I do about those thoughts? How can I transmute them? How can I think about particular situations differently? So for example, instead of thinking about all your coworkers are out to get you, or your bosses just sit on their tushies while you have to do all the hard work, or there's many examples, many different types of examples. How can I perceive a situation in a way that makes me feel alleviated, as opposed to like the victim?
And so the point, what you're saying is that the point of power is inside then.
For sure. So it's a process. So it's a long-term thing. This whole idea of following your highest excitement. It's, I will be better able to notice my highest excitement and follow it as time goes on. Right now, I'm not that great at following my highest excitement or at even noticing it, because my whole life I've trained myself, and the society and the structures around me have trained me to follow things not for my highest excitement, but for reasons A, B, C, D, E, which the society deems to be the most worth chasing. So it's coming to accept where we are and keeping that as a point of reference often. And music has been huge in my experience, to be able to tune out of those thoughts and just come back to my present, come back to where I am. Definitely breath work further along my journey. But yeah, breath work is one of those things.
Yeah, I have it actually. Something I want to ask you about is like sort of your tools, but let's start with one of your most powerful tools and something you teach a lot, which is quantum physics. Sort of your knowledge, your awareness, your understanding of quantum physics. And although I know that sounds pretty lofty for some folks, but there's a way that you speak to it that actually makes it accessible. So say, let's say you're talking to folks in my audience who don't know much about quantum physics. What would you describe it as, just in a what I call in a street term, right? Like in street language, how would you talk about quantum physics, right?
Well, I'm going to say that it can't be spoken about on its own. So for me, just speaking about quantum physics as its own thing doesn't serve much of a purpose for a human being. So we need to understand it from why it's valuable for a human being. So mind psychology, understanding that it's all about thoughts out here. So what is the quality of the thought that you're having at any given point in time? And the collection of beliefs that you hold as a human being, what quality of thoughts are those? So are we believing that we are powerful and that we have the ability to choose what we want? Or do we believe that there are forces out there that are keeping us condemned and keeping us down and controlling us? So one is extremely abundant, the other one is extremely scarce, fearful. So understanding that we humans operate through thought first, we want it is powerful, but then bringing quantum physics into the equation, quantum physics tells us that everything is energy, and that the way that and that our thoughts are energy as well. So energy is always shifting and it's always changing. So if you're in a 9 to 5 that you absolutely hate and the quality of your experience is poor most of the time, it's because the collection of belief systems that you're holding, the thoughts that you're thinking, whether it's conscious or unconscious, are more in the scale of lower energy, scarce energy, fearful energy, lower vibrational, emotional, human, psychological tendencies. But you know that over time, as you shift your thoughts and you shift your beliefs and you do the work, the shadow work to shift them, then you're inevitably going to be able to let go of that job somehow. And what will replace it in the actual physical, material, quantum physics or physical world will change. So knowing that everything is energy and that the way that we're perceiving reality is changing the physical world around us gives us a stronger way of knowing that reality is magical, that things aren't set in stone, that just because things have been a particular way for 15, 20 years doesn't mean that they can't completely change in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next year and a half, in the next 5 years. But that the nature of reality is that everything is always changing. Nothing is set in stone. Only that our minds and beliefs that we hold make it so.
Okay. So everything is energy. Quantum physics holds that everything is energy, and thoughts themselves are energy, right? And really, so as sort of the tool or the system is to be able to shift how we're perceiving any situation, and that in itself will shift the energy of it. Correct, MaGustavo?
Right, so like quantum physics is telling us that there are extremely tiny particles everywhere. But a lot of these little particles become, like a lot of these particles, like little Legos, become the material world.
So sort of subatomic particles here, right, actually, depending on a thought formation, become sort of a mass into the material world. Give us an example of that, even if it's just little.
Well, if you have an idea that you want to create a building, it has to be an idea first. And then you get another idea of who you need to call, who you need to work with, what skills you need to learn. So then you go out and you buy a book to learn a skill. But without having that thought or that idea first, you wouldn't go out to buy the book. You wouldn't make the phone call. You wouldn't pick up the phone call. So as you shift your beliefs, what this does is it empowers you. You go from a disempowered state, believing a lot of stuff that just isn't true, to an empowered state, believing stuff that is more true and definitely truer to yourself, which gives you more of an emotional, which is energy and motion, really, an emotional capacity to make movements in life. Ooh, I feel a little scared to call this person, as opposed to, I need to call this person because this is what I want to bring about in my life and they can help me do it. And I'm just going to do it.
That's a great example. Like that's concrete right there, right? Of how we shift our internal energy that moves into the material world and can shift sort of what you and I talk about, like the internal becoming the external, right? All of a sudden, there it is. There's more power coming from within that goes without, right? Yeah. What is the quantum physics sort of translation there that sort of the thought form shifted in energy?
It's your capacity to move in this reality. So for example, or what is our human bodies are made up of trillions of cells. Each one of those trillions of cells approximately is made up of trillions of atoms. So knowing that what you are at another scale of reality is energy tunes you into you're naturally interconnected to everything because everything is energy. So when you begin to hold that as a belief, your movements are unstoppable. Because if you are everything, then everything is you, and then you have nothing to worry about, nothing to fear. You're just moving through reality and you're just taking actions easily. But more specifically, there's a lot of belief systems that come with knowing yourself as beyond the body and beyond the ego, and knowing yourself as energy, which quantum physics tells us. But so what was the question again? I think I tangented a little bit there.
No. I love it. I love it because this is what you teach. This is what you teach, right? So you teach the belief in heaven on earth, which we totally agree on, and an abundance living, right? In a moment by moment level. But you bring in quantum physics as a very powerful tool. If you understand that everything is energy and therefore that can be movable and shapeable, but not only that, that according to what you're thinking you are shaping energy, and that energy shapes into the material world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I was asking you more so is like, if you had to translate it through quantum physics, sort of that idea of we have a fear, and I guess what's happening there at the subatomic level, right? And how you move past that, let's say to ask the girl on a date, right? Or to try something new, or to move into expansion.
Right. Well, so
Yeah.
first and foremost, it's thought. And we have to imagine that thoughts are held in our bodies first. So the overall collection of thoughts and the energy, the underlying energy pattern of a thought and the belief that we hold, whether it's a really empowering belief or disempowering belief, then it forms the fundamental structure of our bodies, the power that each of the cells have. Because again, cells are made of atomic particles, they're made of energy. So when we do have extremely empowered beliefs held in our minds, in our beingness, it'll translate into a very, very powerful body, for example, over time. We hold emotions in our body. We hold energy in our bodies. And if we're holding on to past limiting beliefs and disempowering beliefs, it's going to show up as some sort of ailment in the body, some sort of inability to go after the thing that we want and desire in this life and want to manifest. Well, for me growing up, I got up to 310 pounds. So a 310-pound body, this was happening in my teens, is not going to have an easy ability to move through this physical reality and go after the things that I truly want necessarily, at least in my view and my perspective and my way of living this life, right? I want to feel really good in my body, not as though the entire weight of the world is living on top of me, as though I'm carrying another human being with me all the time. I want to feel really light. So as I shifted all my belief systems, it became a lot more easy for me to lose weight. Well, one way that this happened was I began to intuit what foods I could begin to eat that were better, what movements I needed to begin to do more to lose some weight. So I began to walk a lot more. I stopped eating so much junk food and I began to eat fruits and vegetables and drink a lot more water. So when we shift our thoughts, it changes the underlying energy in our body. So then the physical world of our body begins to shift, because it starts from within to without.
Yes, 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 yes.
So as you begin to feel more empowered in every single cell of your body, you have a much easier time of enacting things out in the more exterior world. You still can enact anything you want in this physical reality, but how good do you feel while you're doing it? Do you feel at peace? Do you feel at ease? Do you feel really light? Do you feel like it's easy? Or is there a lot of force stopping you from enacting that more easily?
Mhm.
So it's a very, it's so we just dove into, I just dove into a bunch of different things, because it's a bigger, uh, there's a lot of things that go into it.
Well, the way that it's a straight shot, what you're saying into abundant living is part. So I find that one of the characteristics of abundant living is ease. And we resist it a lot. We have a lot, talk about centuries of thoughts, of collections of thoughts that tell us that it can't be easy, or that life shouldn't be light, or that life shouldn't be easy, right? What you're describing is, it's almost like that there's a heaviness to thought, MaGustavo, that some of our thoughts are very, 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 very dense, in terms of lower negative frequencies. And yes, please, please,
Well,
please.
just the thing that's coming to mind
Yes,
is
yes,
one of the
yes.
main practical things that a lot of people go through in life is that they believe that there's a force out there that's trying to keep them down. That there's like this secret cabal or
Mm.
secret societies or the government or something out there is holding them down. That's a
Mhm.
very distressing thought and belief to have. And to me, two things either happen there. One, you lose complete control and you go out and you become this rebel who's just out to take care of those things and out for war, because there's this force out there that you need to bring down. Or you're sitting at home and you're comforting yourself with unhealthy foods, watching a lot of Netflix and just wasting a lot of time, and no movement happens in your life. As opposed to having a thought that is fully empowering, where you know that there's nothing out there that's really holding you down, and that all the power you need is within you. When you begin to realize that all the power you have that is within you, it's a belief, it's a thought, then you no longer feel stressed out. You no longer feel as though something's controlling you. You gain all the control. So now, even if there are forces out there that are trying to keep you down or keep us down, you can approach them from a completely different level of energy, where you can actually make some real change, as opposed to just feeding into that energy and into that system that exists because you've been perpetuating all that energy before.
Sure, sure, sure. A concrete example of that. So, is, let's say you are in a family with abusive parents and controlling parents, right? Or let's say you're part of a church or a church system that maybe has like cult like behaviors. Or um, let's say, right, you're in a marriage where you feel like someone is dominant, controlling, and narcissistic, right? There's no doubt that part of the journey is that you believe that you're in that system, you believe those systems, but that causes, as you say, a lot of distress and a lot of suffering. If you begin to make the internal shift, like, my parents are abusive, or I'm in this relationship where I am no longer myself, or I don't know myself, right? Then all of a sudden you begin to sort of, in psychology, we call it the locus of control. What you just described is the shift, that the locus of control is out there and we bring it back in here. The locus of control is, and it starts with what we're thinking and feeling, right? Now, I think what you've alluded to as well, MaGustavo, is that it does cause a bit of a revolution, right? If you say to your parents, no more, I'm going to tell the school because I will not submit to this type of abuse anymore, or I'm going to tell my aunt, right? Or I'm going to leave, or I'm going to run away, or if you separate from that husband or whatever, right? Because of the shift, the internal shift. It does cause some revolution. It does,
When you
right?
change the thoughts, the physical reality will absolutely change.
Yes, yes,
The process of that is you change your thoughts slowly but surely, as you're saying, and your
yes,
emotions will change. You'll begin
yes,
to feel less stressed. You'll begin to feel more in control, more comfortable. And then naturally, as you're feeling like this, the day to day, the way you behave towards your experience will change in very subtle ways. You'll begin to eat
yes,
differently. You'll begin to move differently. You'll begin to talk to people differently. You'll begin to attract different types of sources that will teach you different things that you need to learn going forward. And then eventually, a year goes by, 2 or 3 years goes by, and the bigger things in your reality will change.
right.
The small things
Beautiful,
become the big things.
beautiful.
Small tiny particles in quantum physics
Yes,
become planets. Small daily little actions and little changes every day in your life become the planets, or
well, like
the
the beliefs that become
shifting.
behaviors that become actual manifestations, right? Like, so so you and I can use many language. In quantum physics, it would be particles actually can become planets, literally subatomic
They do.
particles, right? Yeah,
They do.
they do.
They
Yeah,
are. They are.
absolutely, right, right. And so for folks who are listening to us, also this idea of creating your own reality, right? Like, sort of, can you create your own reality? This is what we're talking about. And I think, and for those people who think that's woo woo, right? Like that's not real. Quantum physics has actually brought in the science of that,
There you go. Yes.
right? That's
Yeah.
what's so
Absolutely.
powerful, is
Absolutely.
is that um, the idea that the observer, which is, we talk about this a ton in meditation,
Yeah.
y'all, my folks, we talk about becoming the observer, of being aware of being the observer, because once you know you are the observer, then you can, and that muscle is developing, then you can start fine tuning, as MaGustavo would say, um, how we want to look at something. Okay, so basically, right, MaGustavo, your introduction of quantum physics into all of this, or 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 the way you teach it, is the idea that yes, it's all energy and it can be amassed into reality, right? Yes, yes, yes.
You use quantum physics as a
Mhm.
belief to allow
Exactly.
yourself to believe
Beautiful.
things.
Yes. Yes. And for those folks who need the science,
Sure.
right? Where this
Absolutely.
isn't all in the realm of like spirituality or trend.
Right. And I love that, because my mind and my beingness works a lot in quantification. So I
Mm,
quantify things, I track things over long periods of time. Like, I see where I'm at today on a particular scale versus where I was and where I will be in the future. And that is telling me a lot about how the energy around me is working and shifting and forming and showing up for me. So
sure.
so definitely for those that do like the science and require maybe more hard proof, quantum physics gives a lot of insight into that. Your thoughts create reality. You are the creator of your reality. Kind of more, that's more of like a maybe metaphysical or like spiritual, psychological way
Hmm.
of looking at things.
Right. And we can use all those languages. And so you and I've talked about, like, sort of in some way, well, we do teach the exact same things and we live it in the same way, but you tend to do the more scientific, well, because it's beautiful. It's so visual, isn't it? Like that everything is energy and that everything is shifted. So we can get the idea of attachment and non-attachment so much easier with this, the visual of quantum physics, right? And that's sort of like, I know that in the structure of your course, that's going to be core. That's going to be core. Quantum physics is core.
There are a few principles there that are very core in quantum physics.
Uh-huh. Do you want to
sure.
just give us 2 or 3, MaGustavo?
Well, everything is energy.
Yes.
And that it forms the material world.
Mm-hmm.
Energy is being shifted in terms of how it looks in the physical world by the observer or by observers, because there's many of us here existing on Earth collectively right now. So everyone has a say in the way our planet shows up. And as you get closer to your own particular experience, so your family, every member of the family has a particular say on how things show up within that dynamic, and to the individual level to a degree. But then also that every single particle in space, so everywhere, is interconnected through wormholes, which means that at any given point in time and space, you have access to the information of everywhere. So that one is quantum entanglement. And that brings in ideas of infinite intelligence, which is more of the yogic approach, understanding that when you tap into that pure awareness within you, deep within the core of your heart, you access all points in space energetically. And then that means that whenever you need something, all you need to do is ask the question and the answer will be delivered to you.
Oh, beautiful. Well, let's, part of, I know that the course that you're building brings together very ancient yogic traditions, and you are actually merging it with quantum physics. Can you say more about that where this overlaps?
Mm-hmm. Everywhere.
For folks in sort of the meditation, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, and who follow yoga. Say more about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, the gist of it, the core of the yogic principles that I teach, really the eightfold path of yoga. So 8 steps, 8 different principles that we must follow in order to get to the core of our beingness, to that place of pure awareness, pure observation, full discernment, seeing reality as it is without any blockages, being able to truly discern whether something is of purity or impurity. So whether it's lack energy or abundance energy. And that each step works you to becoming the type of human being that you need to be in order to tap into that place. And so fundamentally, it's really doing an internal cleanup of yourself, an external cleanup of your environment, and then moving, and that those cleanups happen on a mental level, primarily on beliefs. So you need to get your beliefs right first. Then you can begin to move into your body and creating a body that is capable of manifesting a reality that's worth living. Then you move into the tools, breath work, and understanding the power of the breath and what it can do to reinforce the strength of our body and the strength of our beliefs and our thoughts, and keeping all of that well balanced. And then we move into understanding, this is purely yogic, we move into understanding that the world outside of us is changing all the time. It's temporal. The truth of reality is that pure, unchanging awareness and observation that we have access to all the time. Everything else changes.
So there's a huge distinguishment between what is real and what is not real. Once you're able to truly discern and distinguish what is real versus what is not real, you gain an easier ability to let go of things that are going to change, as opposed to holding on to them. You gain an ability to detach as opposed to staying attached, right? Fundamentally, the core of it is the fear of death. And we fear dying because we believe we are the body and we believe that we are the ego. So that this whole process is really untangling ourselves from the belief that we are the body and we are the ego, to the knowing that what we are is observing all of that. And if in our observation something feels off and doesn't feel good to us, we can let it go and entertain and bring about something that feels a lot better to us, and integrate that. Once we begin to make that distinguishment, we really fine tune all of that by then practices and tools that allow us to go much deeper. And ultimately that is focus. Having a focus point for an extended period of time. Once you're able to hold your focus and your attention on a particular extremely pure thought or focal point, you can penetrate into pure awareness much more deeply. So the way that quantum physics comes into this is the deeper your ability to penetrate into a focal point in your observation and in your attention, the more access you have to the entirety of space, of energy. The more you can actually use quantum entanglement to bring to you all the pieces of information that you require to manifest the life that you're here to manifest. Science also tells us that each and every single human being has unique DNA that includes a blueprint as to how they should show up and behave and manifest their life. So this isn't just woo-woo, that everybody has their own unique purpose and divine plan and path that they need to follow. It's something inborn in our DNA. And once every human being is following this unique DNA blueprint, everyone is specializing in exactly what they need to specialize in and can be of assistance to the whole, as opposed to the individual.
I'm gonna stop you there because I need to break down, and I know that when I need to break down, my audience probably needs to break it down. Okay, so there's something so powerful about what you're saying, and I want us to get back to breath work. But so I happen to believe that the ability that you described of what I call focusing or holding pure positive thought, penetrating, as you would say, right, is actually what people describe as miracles. So the ability, right? So I think that Jesus was a miracle worker because he could actually do that. He could actually hold thought at a consistent vibrational level and hold it. Not like, so the parable was that the disciples would look down at the water and up and down at the water. And that's what we keep doing in our lives. But his ability to just say, I can walk on water and hold that, right? Is, so for folks who want to manifest, who want to become manifestors, is your ability to hold pure thought, right? And what you're saying is that quantum physics teaches us that if we can do that, or yogic principles, that we have access to all sorts of information, which you also call energy, right, Magus? You talk a lot about, right, energy is information. So we have access to all of that. And that actually masses into a manifestation. And that's where manifestations fall into our lap. Okay. But it requires what you were saying, right? This cleanup of can I not? Is it me? Am I weak? Am I strong? If you can hold thought the way you're describing it, penetrating. I like sort of this word penetrating. I like it a lot because it's laser, isn't it?
Right through the illusion.
Yes, it's laser focus. And the illusion being lack.
Limitation.
Yeah, the illusion, the ultimate illusion being that we are limited.
Yep.
Right? And this is what you are preaching or teaching. And therefore, we have access to abundant living. Okay. Then what you're also saying is that each of us does come in with a purpose.
Absolutely. The DNA. If you need proof,
Yeah.
if you need proof and not just
Yeah.
spiritual texts to tell you that,
Yeah.
it's proven that our DNA strands are unique. Everybody has unique DNA.
Sort of like our fingerprints.
Sure.
Uh-huh.
But also, just to add there, come full circle with Jesus. Jesus is the most famous yogi on the planet in the history of humankind.
And yogic meaning what for folks who don't know that type of language?
Well, yoga is just a tradition that was brought about by Indians. I think a lot of people have a misconception that yoga is an Indian Eastern thing. It's not. It's a human being thing. So Patanjali, who was the creator of the Yoga Sutras back in the day, was just a guy who scientifically wrote down human evolution from thinking one is an ego and a human body to pure awareness, to what we truly are. And he wrote it down because people were conducting yoga in India at the time, everywhere, but he scientifically wrote it down. And what it is he intended it to be for all humans, no matter culture, no matter creed, no matter age, no matter sex, gender, no matter nothing. So that's what yoga is, right? It's not some weird Eastern thing where people are just doing poses. Yoga is a science. It's a science of how you can take yourself from experience a reality in which things are seemingly really difficult, to taking your experience into a reality in which things are simple and easy and heaven on earth like.
Right. And part of that simplicity, we keep saying the same thing, is removing the layers, your language be of illusion, but in sort of removing the layers of thought collections that become our identity. And that little by little, as we develop the muscle of letting go and letting go, if it's not serving our highest excitement, we're just going to bring in all the language we've been using, right? Like, and following our highest excitement, the identity click, what I call like sort of that, those identity moments, right? Lead us to the path of maybe what our purpose is. Are you saying something like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, MaGustavo.
Ultimately, everyone has the same purpose, and that purpose is to know yourself as pure awareness. That purpose is to understand that you are not the body and you are not the ego. That what you are is that which is observing the body and the ego, and that you can change anything you want at any given point in time. So keep changing in the direction of what makes you feel amazing.
Yes.
And don't settle and not choose to change things that make you feel bad and that don't uplift you and that make you feel like you're just settling and not being the best you can be.
Yeah.
That's everybody's purpose. Now, how that purpose shows up in the day-to-day, well, just uplift others, right? Like, but who knows what you might be? Who knows what you might get into? You know, you could be anything in this world, really. I think that's what most people are stuck on anyways, more of that day-to-day purpose as opposed to a grander purpose, but that is the vision in a sense. But yes, the purpose will unfold slowly but surely, or maybe not a grand purpose, but you will feel more purposeful in your day-to-day. You will feel like your actions are actually creating a change. They're creating an impact. You're having a purpose.
Which I actually think is really important to underscore for your course. Like you're not just learning tools, all of these tools and all of these principles, and I'm sure, you know, as folks who are going to watch this will see that one of your strongest languages is bringing it back to science, even yogic traditions or and that and DNA and sort of the that finding who we are is not just an existential, although it is, right? It all comes together. Psychology, yogic principles, quantum physics, it all comes together towards the same thing. And you use the word breadcrumbs, right? The breadcrumbs is this awareness of what makes us feel good. Let me just clean something up as we're talking. So sometimes this is personal, so don't, you know, when I hear about like we are not our ego, we are not our body, right? Like you know, in the way that I grew up in a Christian tradition, it's sort of like the body is bad. And I'm so far away from that. Like, in fact, you know me, and you know that part of what I believe is that the more I ascend, or the higher I become spiritually, the more I can embody, and the more I can relish, really, really find pleasure in my physical experience, right? And that, but that's because of awareness. And then certainly as a clinician as well, what happens in post-traumatic stress disorder is that it becomes this huge entity that takes over the body in a way that's horrifying, horrifying, right? All systems are whack when we have post-traumatic stress. We are triggered constantly. And so the body becomes a very hard and difficult and painful place to be, even though it's our home. It's our home, right? So part of the thing with post-traumatic stress, through all sorts of treatments and now psychedelic treatment, is to start allowing for the post-traumatic stress disorder to begin to be liberated from the body.
Yeah.
And therefore we can be more embodied and enjoy our body.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'm also like super sex positive and pleasure positive and all of that, to be in the body. Are you, so can we fine tune that? Because sometimes it's like we are not the ego, we are not the body.
Yeah.
Can sometimes be like bad body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say more. Yeah.
There are tools.
Mm.
So just like a carpenter doesn't want to work with a saw that is dull, as a human, you don't want to work with a body that's dull. You want to sharpen the body. You want to make the body as pristine, as sharp, as clear, as powerful, as impactful in every single moment as you can.
Beautiful.
The ego is it's like the operations control for the body in a sense. So
beautiful. Yes.
So you want to make sure that that you understand that you're not that thing, but that you are instructing the ego. You want to have awareness and observe the ego. It's a tool. So you're not the hammer that hammers in nails as the carpenter. You're the carpenter that uses the hammer appropriately. So when we interact with others, it's a huge ego component. So you want to make sure that you're not being controlled by that tool and taking advantage of other people, and like superiority complex, thinking you're better than other people. Awareness, everyone is awareness. Everyone is the observer, ultimately, innately.
So as we become more aware, we can actually choose what ego we want to be in the world, right? So do we want to be a kind ego, a collaborative, like, right? How do we want to interact? A non-judgmental ego, because we could choose to be a very, very, very judgmental ego. Is that some of what you're saying in terms of, like, we have choice through awareness as to what persona or what ego we are using as a tool?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it's who we think we are and what we think we are. And that's the ego. So if who we think we are and what we think we are is leading to poor life experiences, then there's something going on. We're identifying more with an ego belief that is not serving us. So understanding that, then we can shift whatever that is to something else that will serve us. So it's understanding that those things aren't stuck. Like, I am not, like, for example, some people adamantly say, I am this thing. I am Republican. But does it serve you to be that? I know I went political, I don't know why, but does it serve you to be that thing that you so strongly think you are? Or does it create a lot of turmoil and disturbance in your life? At any given point in time, you can just say, oh, I'm not that thing. I'm actually a little bit like this too, and a little bit like that, and a little bit like that. And it's okay for me to be a little bit like all of these things, because being a little bit like all of these things allows me to have a flow of experience. So I am a little bit like that, so I can talk to these kinds of people. I am a little bit like that, so I can talk to these kinds of people. I'm a little bit like that too, so I can go to the middle of anywhere I want to go and exist as they exist there. But if I think I am this way, I won't be able to go and exist anywhere I want to. I'm severely limited. So once we understand that we are not something, we are not, like, I'm not this thing, or just because I won a competition in the past, I'm not that competition winner, or so it's identification. And it's not being attached to identifying as any particular thing. It's more so understanding that you are something that is capable of detaching from identifying as something and then choosing something else.
Sure. And that the navigating system is how you're feeling.
Yeah, ultimately.
Right? Because there's some things that I was in my teens or in my 20s that just that really causes me a lot of distress. Sure. Now that I'm my age, right? Now in my 50s, let's say. Sure. Right? So like, and I guess the awareness tools, or this process, allows us to move more quickly through those ego deaths, and those shifts, those internal shifts, right?
So quantum physics. Who are you? Well, at one level, you're the body, and you're the ego, and you're this name that was given to you at birth. On another level, you are energy. You're always changing, so you're not just the name for the rest of your life. You're not just this body for the rest of your life. You're energy. You're always changing. You're infinite and eternal. Right? You're connected to every point in space and time. So once you know that, because quantum physics is sharing that with us, you can begin to tune more into that. As you begin to tune more into that, your natural attachment to thinking you're just these things begins to break down slowly but surely into a more expansive view. So you don't lose your identity and you don't lose your body. You just become less attached to it. And from that place of less attachment, you can enact changes that you want to see.
It's so beautiful, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely.
It's so beautiful. We literally have access to all of this. We have access. So speaking of access, I'm also aware, like, I could go hours with you, MaGustavo, but can we talk just one last little thing that I think truly brings it all together in so many ways, and we'll definitely, you're going to teach it, is breath work. Okay, like, the other day, you and I were just talking about, for example, about neuroscience and breath work, and so, like, there's so many biology and breath work, neuroscience and breath work, like yogic principles and breath, like it's truly a beautiful thread, right?
Yeah.
So talk, because I know that's going to be also one of a core part of your course. So, yeah. And, you know, there's so much work being done with breath work right now.
Yeah.
There's so, like, for those of you, take it, do
Yeah.
breath work, do breath work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the most powerful tool that we have as human beings to exist in the flow of abundance on a moment-to-moment basis. So the breath has the capacity of bringing you into a meditative state at any point, anywhere you are. So fundamentally, we fall out of the flow as human beings, the flow of ease and the flow of comfort and the flow of knowing we're guided and supported and 100% whole and complete. We fall out of that natural state of flow. When we come in as kids, we're naturally joyful, we're naturally curious for the most part. We naturally have this sense of adventure for the most part, don't want to generalize. But then as we grow up in life, we gain all these beliefs that limit us. And all these beliefs keep us in a more of a survival mode, which completely limits our breath. So the more we work with our breath and the more we expand our breath and the more we learn to use our breath, the easier it becomes for us to deal or handle moments of the disconnection. So, I mean, again, it depends where you are on your journey. Breath work is not something for people who are just beginning their journey to you have to find yourself, in a sense, already a little bit further on your journey.
Well, can I insert there, sort of clinically, for folks who are just starting the journey? The way that breath is helpful is sort of identifying if you're in an alarm state or not, like anxiety attacks, if you're having a trigger, if you're having a panic attack. That's very biology, right? That's very in the body. Even so, at that level, at just that human biological level, noticing your breath and sort of training your breath during a panic attack is important. What you're talking about, MaGustavo, is really accessing higher levels of consciousness. And that's where breath work comes in, correct? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're more on the beginning of the journey, it makes sense to go out to a breathwork class and be guided through it. But the more you do that, over time, you can begin to really tune into your own breath and do it on your own. And when you're able to get to that point, then you have more of an ability to stay in the flow, because triggers and limiting beliefs that come up towards any particular situation you might be navigating at any given point in time, you'll be able to bring yourself back into the now moment, out of your mind, out of your thoughts, out of your emotions. You'll be able to bring the emotions into control. And this has a lot to do with the nervous system, the human nervous system. And I mean, it's another topic in and of itself, but for sure, if you can bring awareness to your breath in a simple meditation that you might sit down for, it allows you to center yourself and bring yourself present. It's the human being's innate way of staying in control and not feeling out of control. And yeah, the deeper we can breathe into our bodies, the deeper we can breathe into our bellies, the way that we see babies breathe, the way that we see animals naturally breathe very deep into the belly. We want to, over time, gain an ability that to be able to take in breaths more deeply and more fully at the unconscious autopilot level without being consciously aware of it. And the deeper our breath goes, the more of an ability we have to control our mental, emotional, and physical vessels and beingness. And the more of an easy ability we have to tap into that place of awareness and observation and look at what's going on around us, as opposed to reacting to past experiences or future panics, which are kind of brought on from past experiences.
Sure. So like one of the ways that I'd like to have all those points connect is, so, so many meditations use the breath. I definitely use the breath, and I always call it like a coming home, right? It's life itself. The breath is life itself, right? If we have no breath, we have no life. So it's like a coming home. It's also a point of focus. Meditation works on that. Like we keep coming home to the breath and coming home to the breath and literally coming home to the self, right? There's also for me, and people see my sort of the way I work with them and how weird I can look sometimes when I go into a very deep breath. And I feel like, MaGustavo, that it allows me to go so deeply inside myself that I can deeply intuit and sometimes psychically intuit what's happening with others or in my environment, right? Like if I can do a very deep, profound breath, I can actually feel the energy or the information that's happening around me. Let's say between you and me, or between me and my client, right? But I think one of the things that I find really powerful that you're going to talk about breath work, is also the ability, just like psychedelics, just like therapy, that breath work will bring up stuff, emotions that through the breath work can actually leave the body, right? That's why breath work is so important in post-traumatic stress disorder. Like there's so much of the breath. It's just everything. And it, it sounds like your course is just connecting so many things. So we can't leave this work with the breath out of it. It's one of the core pieces. So MaGustavo, we're almost at the end of our time. Can you go ahead and tell us like where to find you? I've loved your YouTube stuff, for example. And then I want you to close out with this course that you're going to launch, that it's going to be just epic. But let's start with where to find you.
Absolutely. So I got Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube social media presences. You can find me there at w.m. and then MaGustavo.
Yes.
And
I'll have the links. I'll have the links there.
Yeah.
And for folks in the audience, like MaGustavo's posts I always tell them that I have to do a reread. Like I read it once and then I go back and I integrate it. And the YouTube stuff is really just concrete and helpful and direct. So both sides of MaGustavo show up, like his PhD professor side when he writes, I would say, right? Your sort of your theses. But in the YouTube channel, I just find that your energy and sort of really concrete, you do a lot of like, this is what to do in your YouTube channels that I really like. That's the combination. We got to know, but we got to know how, Say more about your course. You're developing a really interesting course.
Yeah. So it'll be my first course.
Okay.
So it's really me bringing together all of the things that I have learned, that I've experienced, that I've been working on for the past years. Fundamentally, it's going to include yogic principles, quantum physics, and human mind psychology. It's very important to understand yogic science, yogic principles, because it's the journey that human beings go on towards enlightenment, liberation, just really experiencing life on a much easier and more peaceful manner, and knowing how to interact with your environment, knowing who you are and what you are at the core. Quantum physics really gives us that more tangible proof, that more there are actual human beings doing the science that yoga sets out in a materialistic way, in a way in which when we know who we truly are and what we truly are, actually begins to manifest in the material world. So fundamentally, everything is energy. Another word for energy is information. And another word for that is matter, materializes. Energy is information that materializes. And human mind psychology is really most of the core of the work, because it's all thoughts are creating reality. And we need to understand and know, first of all, what is the variety of potential thoughts and beliefs and human being laws of human nature that we're encountering on a day-to-day basis, individually and collectively with the people around us. So we need to know when we're going through certain patterns, become aware of those certain patterns so that we can shift those patterns. And we can move more from our lower ego state of being, which is mostly in survival mode, in a state of fear, into more of the higher ego state of being, which is more in an abundant, loving, compassionate, accepting, and ability to work with others state of being. So we learned that psychology, and all three go hand in hand. All three, we need to have a bird's eye view on all three, because each one, it offers us empowering ways of being. So the course is fundamentally going to offer a lot of connections that perhaps were not there before. And through more interconnections we make in our own beingness, we can find more interconnection with the world at large.
Right.
The more insight we have, the more things we can connect, the more clear we are on life. And the easier we can take actions that benefit us, benefit those around us, and fundamentally overall benefit the planet.
Yes, yes. What Amanda would call the win-win-win, right?
Yeah.
Like the self, others, and the planet, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to teach a lot of things that are going to allow individuals to make a lot of mental connections. And when you can make true mental connections, you'll have true emotional connections. You'll feel really good because they're like epiphanies. They're like, whoa, I never saw things like that. That's amazing. Once you do that, you're going to have more motivation. There's going to be more excitement to naturally want to be and do more things in this life.
Yes, yes, yes. And your story embodies that, right? I always say, like, I don't ever teach what I don't go through, right? Because people will get my resonance. And for you, for sure, MaGustavo, like your resonance is that this has been your story, which is why I wanted to hear a little bit about your story, right? At the beginning, because this is where you're culminating, actually. And of course, culminating into interconnectedness, right?
Amazing.
It's so amazing. MaGustavo, thank you so much. So it's been so, yes, 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 both of us, for sure. Thank you, thank you. It's so satisfying and gratifying to have these deep, deep, deep dive conversations. The way that I usually finish these conversations is I read some descriptions. So if you can just be the receiver of this. So the word is dynamic. You know that that's my methodology. That's my belief. That's everything for me is dynamic. And so there's 4 descriptions I have. So number 1, a process or system characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. We just talked about that.
Absolutely.
Number 2, a person positive in attitude and full of energy and new ideas. Bam.
Absolutely.
Check, right? Right? 3, a force that stimulates change or progress within a system or process. Check. Correct. And 4, a dynamic person is one who is gelled and connects a person who really makes a difference in the world, who does something that changes things or people. And so, MaGustavo, it's very precise to thank you for joining me in a dynamic conversation, because I see you as an extremely dynamic person. So folks, I'm going to have links to how to get in touch with MaGustavo and to have, announcements about your course coming out. And again, thank you. Gracias en español.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gracias. De vuelta.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.